What do you do when your husband and his entire family show up to your house to throw a party for his mistress? You let them. Especially when you sold the house 3 days ago, and the new owners and the sheriff are all scheduled to arrive at exactly 7 p.m. He thought he was coming home to my house with his mistress. He planned to kick me out, to erase me from the life we had built, and to simply replace me. What Damien didn't know was that I had already sold it. He didn't know that the new owners, a lovely family with 2 kids, were about to pull into the driveway. He didn't know that a sheriff's deputy was parked just down the street, holding a freshly printed set of divorce papers with his name on them. He walked right into my trap, a smiling, tanned, self-assured fool returning from a week of betrayal, about to have his entire world dismantled in front of his precious family. And I was sitting across the street in my lawyer's car watching the whole beautiful, terrible, magnificent show unfold. The first doorbell was about to ring, and it was the overture to his complete and utter ruin. To understand how a 4-year marriage ends with a sheriff, a moving truck, and a meticulously planned ambush, you have to understand what came before. You have to understand the quiet humiliations, the 1,000 tiny cuts that bleed you dry so slowly you don't even realize you're dying. It didn't start with a bang. It started with a whisper, a feeling. That cold, sinking dread in the pit of your stomach when the person sleeping next to you starts to feel like a stranger. Damien wasn't always a monster. Or maybe he was, and I was just too blinded by love to see the fangs. When we first met, he was charm personified. He had this way of looking at you, like you were the only person in a crowded room, that made your knees weak. He was a rising star in Boston's financial world, sharp, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He promised me a lifetime of partnership, of respect, a lifetime of us against the world. But promises, I've learned, are only as strong as the person who makes them. Damien's were made of glass. For years I told myself I was being paranoid. The late nights at the office, the business trips that popped up with increasing frequency, the way his phone would be angled away from me, screened down, always screened down. I became an expert at self-deception because the alternative was too painful to confront. I was a respected interior designer. I ran my own small firm, but at home I felt my own value shrinking. I was becoming an accessory in his life, someone to maintain the perfect home, to host the perfect dinner parties, to smile perfectly for his colleagues. The real me, the woman with dreams and a voice, was fading, and I let it happen. Have you ever had that gut feeling? That tiny whisper telling you something is deeply wrong? Let me know if you've ever ignored it, because I did for years. I chose to believe the lies because the truth meant my life was a lie, and that was a wreckage I wasn't ready to face. But the universe has a way of forcing your hand. It sends you a sign so blatant, so insulting, that you can no longer look away. For me, that sign wasn't a lipstick stain or a suspicious credit card bill. It was a phone call about a family vacation. A vacation to Nantucket Island, the place where his family had gone every summer for decades. A vacation that, for the 4th year in a row, did not include me. That one phone call was the loose thread that, when I finally dared to pull it, would unravel everything. Before I tell you about that phone call, you need to understand where I was when I answered it. I wasn't just in a house. I was standing inside a sanctuary, a legacy, the very heart of my family. The house wasn't in some trendy Boston suburb. It was a beautiful, rambling colonial home nestled on 2 acres of land in Concord, Massachusetts, the kind of place that smells perpetually of old books, lemon polish, and history. My grandmother, Eleanor, had left it to me, and only me, in her will. It was the house she was born in, the house my mother grew up in, and the house where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, chasing fireflies in the sprawling backyard and listening to her stories on the screened-in porch. Every creak in the wide plank floors was a footstep from the past. Every sunbeam that slanted through the wavy, original glass windows felt like a warm memory. To an appraiser, it was a piece of real estate valued at a staggering $1.8 million. To me, it was priceless. My grandmother was not a woman who left things to chance. She was a force of nature, sharp, loving, and fiercely protective. When she passed away, just a year before I married Damien, her lawyer sat me down and walked me through the will. The house was mine, free and clear. But she had done something else, something I barely registered at the time. She'd added a few specific lines of text to the deed, a clause so particular that the lawyer called it the Eleanor Special. She told me my grandmother insisted on it. "A good man will respect this house as yours," my grandmother had told me once, long ago. "And a man who isn't good, well, this house will protect you from him." I remember smiling, thinking it was just her being dramatic. I had no idea she was handing me a loaded gun and telling me to keep it hidden until I needed it most. That clause was her final gift, a shield she knew I might one day need. It would become my ultimate weapon. Damien, of course, never understood the soul of that house. He saw it in terms of square footage and property taxes. When he moved in after our wedding, he contributed nothing to its upkeep, yet he spoke of it as our place with an air of ownership that always made my skin crawl. He'd walk through the rooms my grandmother had so lovingly decorated and talk about opening up the floor plan or maximizing the resale value. He saw a financial asset, a stepping stone. I saw my grandmother's ghost sitting in her favorite armchair by the fire. He wanted to gut the history from its walls. I wanted to preserve it. This difference, which seemed small at first, was the foundational crack in our marriage. He didn't just want to renovate a house, he wanted to renovate me, to strip away my past and my identity until all that was left was Mrs. Damien Black, mistress of his impressive estate. Is there a place or an object in your life that holds that kind of memory? Something that's more than just a thing? I would love to hear about it. That house was my connection to the strongest woman I'd ever known, and he was trying to sever it. So, on that Tuesday afternoon in late June, I was in the sunroom, the one my grandmother called her thinking parlor, repotting one of her ancient ferns. The air was warm, smelling of damp earth and blooming peonies from the garden just outside. I felt a rare moment of peace, a connection to her, to the lineage of strong women who had lived and breathed within those walls. I was safe there. I was home. It was in that perfect, tranquil moment that my phone began to buzz on the wicker table beside me. It was Damien. I answered with a smile, completely unaware that the man on the other end of the line was about to take a metaphorical sledgehammer to the sacred ground on which I stood. "Hey, babe!" Damien's voice was offensively cheerful, crackling with the forced energy of a man who is about to ask for something he knows he has no right to. I could hear the familiar sounds of his downtown Boston office in the background, the low hum of computers, the distant city traffic. "Got a second?" "Of course," I said, setting down my small trowel. "Everything okay?" I pictured him leaning back in his expensive leather chair, loosening his tie, a portrait of effortless success. "Better than okay." "So, great news. The annual Black family pilgrimage is a go. We're heading to Nantucket next Wednesday for a full week. I just booked an incredible house near Matticat Beach. Plane tickets are all set." A familiar tightness coiled in my chest. The annual pilgrimage. A tradition I had been systematically excluded from since we were married. The first year, the excuse was that I was too busy with a major design project. The second, I was still recovering from that nasty flu, and the sea air wouldn't be good for me. Last year, he'd claimed the rental was a last-minute booking and simply didn't have enough bedrooms. Each excuse was a paper-thin veil over the truth. His mother, Regina, did not consider me family, and Damien didn't have the spine to defy her. Still, a pathetic sliver of hope flickered within me. Maybe this year, maybe after 4 years, I had finally earned my place. "That sounds amazing," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "You booked my ticket as well, then?" There was a slight pause on his end, the kind of pause that isn't empty, but filled with a gathering lie. "Well, that's the thing, honey," he began, his voice shifting into that placating tone he used when he was about to steamroll me. "You know how Mom is about feeling cramped. The rental only has 4 bedrooms, and with my brother Leo bringing his new girlfriend this time, it's just, well, it's packed." I stayed silent, letting the unspoken insult hang in the air. I waited for him to at least invent a better lie. He didn't. Instead, he made it worse. "Besides," he continued, as if this next part was a perfectly reasonable and logical point, "someone needs to look after the garden. You know those blue hydrangeas I bought for the front walkway? They were insanely expensive, and they need very specific watering. I can't trust some random landscaping service to get it right. I really need you to be here, to make sure they don't wilt. You're so much better at it." My vision tunneled. The beautiful, sun-drenched room around me seemed to dim. He wasn't talking to his wife. He was talking to his groundskeeper. My worth, in this critical family moment, was less than that of a decorative shrub. A plant he had bought to impress the neighbors was a higher priority than my presence, my feelings, my inclusion in our family. My knuckles were white as I gripped the phone, my fingernails digging into my palm. I was a fixture of the house, a useful appliance to be left behind to ensure the rest of the assets were maintained. My voice, when I finally found it, was unrecognizable. It was eerily calm, devoid of any emotion. I see. Well, you all have a wonderful time. The sigh of relief on his end was a physical blow. I knew you'd understand, Aurora. You are the most accommodating person I know. He said the word accommodating like it was the highest compliment a woman could receive. But I heard it for what it was, convenient. I was convenient. Tell me if this sounds familiar, being praised for being easygoing or accommodating, when in reality you're just swallowing your own pain to keep the peace. How many of us have been told that our greatest strength is our silence? I hung up the phone without another word, my hand frozen in midair. I stood there for a long time, staring at the fern I had been nurturing. This wasn't just an oversight. This wasn't just another trip. This was a message, loud and clear. It was a valuation of my role in his life. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. Or maybe it was the moment I finally began to wake up. For about an hour, I didn't move. I just stood in the sunroom, the phone a dead weight in my hand, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The initial shock, that white-hot flash of humiliation, began to cool and harden into something else. It became a cold, heavy certainty in my bones. The accommodating wife, the woman who smiled through condescending remarks from his mother and politely ignored his increasingly flimsy excuses, was gone. She had died on that phone call. In her place stood a woman who needed answers. Not suspicions, not gut feelings, cold, hard proof. And I knew exactly where to start looking. His office. It was the one room in my grandmother's house that felt alien, a space I had designed for him but was implicitly forbidden from entering without an invitation. Confidential client files, he'd always say, closing the heavy oak door. You understand? I had always respected that boundary. I believed in privacy, in trust. But trust is a two-way street, and I was beginning to realize I was the only one driving on it. What do you do when you get to that point? That crossroad where you know that opening that door, or in my case unlocking that phone, will change your life forever. Do you walk away to keep the peace, or do you step through and face the fire? I walked toward the fire. The office was, as always, impeccably tidy. A massive mahogany desk, shelves of leather-bound law and finance books, a faint, lingering scent of his expensive cologne. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and resolve. I started with the desk drawers. Nothing, just files, branded stationery, expensive pens. Then I remembered the closet. It was a small walk-in closet where he kept his bulky winter coats, but he'd installed a lock on it last year. For the irreplaceable work files, he'd explained with a wave of his hand. He kept the key on his person at all times. Or so I thought. Where would a man like Damien, a man whose ego was matched only by his arrogance, hide a spare? Not somewhere sentimental, somewhere that fed his sense of self-importance. My eyes scanned the bookshelf. Sun Tzu's The Art of War, The Intelligent Investor, and there a first edition biography of Rockefeller. My fingers traced the spine, and I felt it a small flat key, taped neatly to the inside back cover. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. Inside, his perfectly organized suits hung on one side. On the other, on a small shelf, sat his leather briefcase, the one he supposedly took to the office every day. But his work bag was downstairs by the front door. This was a second briefcase. My hands were trembling as I opened it. Tucked inside a velvet pouch was a sleek black smartphone I had never seen before. A burner phone. My breath hitched. It was locked, of course. I tried our anniversary. Access denied. My birthday. Access denied. His birthday. Denied. Then a cold thought slid into my mind. It wouldn't be about us. It wouldn't even be about him. It would be about his mother. I typed in Regina's birthday. 0516. The screen lit up. I was in. What I found was a methodical digital chronicle of a 4-year-long betrayal. There was a text thread with a woman named Sofia, filled with pet names and inside jokes. They talked about me. They called me the housekeeper and the Concord fixture. There was a photo gallery filled with pictures of them on the very business trips I had packed for him. There they were in Aspen, in Miami. And there, a photo that made the air leave my lungs. The two of them, smiling on a beach in Nantucket, dated last July. While I was home with the flu, he had been with her, in the place he claimed was too small for me. But the final, devastating blow was the banking app. A separate account, in his name only. I scrolled through years of transactions. Regular, monthly transfers to an S. Vance. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Lavish gifts from Tiffany's. Credit card payments for an address in downtown Boston. I pulled out a pen from his desk, my hands shaking so badly I could barely write. I started adding up the numbers. The total was obscene. It was a life-altering amount of money. In the last 2 years alone, it was nearly $250,000. He hadn't just given another woman his body and his heart. He had given her our future. He had given her my money. I sank to the floor, the phone clutched in my hand, the evidence of my stolen life glowing in the dark. The pain was excruciating, but beneath it, a strange calm settled over me. This was no longer about a ruined marriage. This was about war. I sat there on the floor of his office for what felt like an eternity, the cold wood pressing into my skin, the glow of the burner phone illuminating the absolute wreckage of my marriage. $250,000. $250,000 siphoned away to fund a double life, to buy jewelry for another woman, to pay for vacations I was never invited on. In that moment, I honestly thought I had hit rock bottom. I thought I had uncovered the worst of it, that this staggering financial betrayal was the final, ugly secret. I was so wrong. The hole was so much deeper. A cold instinct, a survival mechanism kicking in, told me to look again. To be sure, I forced myself to my feet and went back to the leather briefcase, my movements stiff and robotic. I had to see it all. I had to know the full shape of the monster I had been sleeping next to. At the very bottom, beneath the pouch that held the phone, was a crisp, pale yellow manila folder. It was unmarked, but it felt heavy, important. I slid it out and my breath caught in my throat. In the top left corner was the familiar blue and red logo of a major national bank, the same bank that held the mortgage on my parents' home. My hands trembled as I opened the clasp. The document inside was thick, nearly 50 pages long, filled with dense financial jargon. But I didn't need to read the fine print. The words at the top of the first page screamed at me in bold black letters. Home equity line of credit application. On Main and Calizas. My blood ran cold. A HELOC. A loan taken out against the value of a home. I scanned down the page, my eyes searching for the details, praying I was wrong. Property address. My address. My home in Concord. Applicant name, Damian Black. And then, right below his, co-applicant name, Aurora Miller Black. I felt a wave of nausea. Why would we be taking a loan against my house? We didn't need the money. Then I saw the requested credit line. $500,000. $500,000. My mind couldn't process it. For what? I frantically flipped through the pages, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I found the section titled Purpose of Loan. The box checked was Family Real Estate Investment. And then I found the last page, the signature page. It was a form I'd seen before, a standard document requiring the consent of all parties on the property's deed. There was Damian's signature, a confident, arrogant slash of ink. And next to it, on the line designated for me, was my name, written in my own elegant, looping script. It was a perfect forgery. Chillingly perfect. He must have practiced, tracing my signature from old birthday cards or letters. The care he had taken to mimic my hand was a special kind of cruelty. I want you to imagine that for a second. Seeing your own name, written in your own hand, but by someone else, on a document designed to steal from you. It's a specific kind of violation, isn't it? It's not just theft, it's an erasure of your will, of your voice. Suddenly, it all made a horrifying kind of sense. His brother, Leo, and his new fiancée had been complaining for months about being priced out of the Boston condo market. Damian's mother, Regina, had been dropping hints for weeks about how Damian needed to step up and help his brother. This wasn't just a loan. This was a conspiracy. Damien was planning to defraud a bank by forging my signature, saddling my grandmother's legacy with $500,000 of debt, and using the money to buy a luxury condo for his deadbeat brother. And I, the actual owner of the home, would have been completely in the dark until the first bill arrived. He was going to steal my inheritance, my sanctuary, right from under my nose, and he was going to do it while he was on vacation with his mistress. The sheer audacity of it, the absolute contempt he had for me, was breathtaking. The pain I felt just moments before was gone, cauterized by a blast of pure, white-hot rage. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was a crime. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had broken federal law, and I was no longer a victim. I was the star witness to his future prosecution. I stood up, walked out of his office, and made the first real decision of my new life. I called my best friend, Isabel, and I told her to get ready for war. The phone rang twice before Isabel picked up. Her voice was warm and familiar, the sound of a 15-year friendship. "Aurora? Hey, I was just thinking about you. What's up?" "Izzy," I said, and my voice was a raw, ragged thing I didn't recognize. "I need you. Not as my friend. I need my lawyer." The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by the sharp, focused tone that had made her one of the most feared young litigators in Boston. "What happened? Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the house. And no, I'm not okay." I started talking, and once I started, I couldn't stop. The words tumbled out of me in a frantic, furious torrent. The Nantucket trip, the burner phone, the pictures, the woman named Sofia, the $250,000 in secret transfers. I told her everything, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it was going to split me in two. She listened without interruption, a series of soft "oh my gods" and sharp intakes of breath, the only sign she was still there. When I finally got to the part about the forged signature on the $500,000 HELOC application, there was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. "Isabel, are you there?" I asked. Her voice, when it came, was as cold and sharp as ice. "Aurora, listen to me very carefully. Do not touch anything else in that office. Do not delete anything from that phone. Take photos of everything, then put it all back exactly as you found it. We meet at my office, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp, and do not, under any circumstances, speak to Damien." She paused. "He's not just a cheater, Aurora. He's a felon." The next morning, sitting in Isabel's glass-walled office overlooking the Boston Harbor, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The evidence was laid out on her massive conference table, printed copies of the bank statements, screenshots of the texts, and a high-resolution photo of my forged signature. Isabel, all business in her sharp navy suit, examined everything with a grim expression. "This is ironclad," she said, her voice low. "The affair, the dissipation of marital assets, we can take him to the cleaners. The forgery on the loan application is a federal crime. We can destroy his career, his reputation, everything." She looked up at me, her eyes softening for a moment. "But there's a problem. The house. Even though it's your inheritance, he's been living there for 4 years as your husband. His name is on the deed as your spouse. A judge will see that. He'll fight you for a piece of it. And a contested divorce over a property like this could drag on for years, Aurora. Years of legal fees and emotional torture." My heart sank. The thought of fighting him for my grandmother's house, of him having any claim to it at all, was unbearable. Then, a memory surfaced, a faint echo from the past. "Wait," I said, leaning forward. "There was something else. In my grandmother's will, her lawyer made a point of it. He called it the Eleanor Special, something she insisted on adding to the deed to protect the house." Isabel's eyes lit up with professional curiosity. She swiveled to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Property records are public," she murmured. "Let's see what your grandmother was up to." She pulled up the digital files from the county recorder's office. She scrolled for a moment, and then she stopped. She leaned in closer to the screen. Her breath held. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Aurora. Your grandmother wasn't just a wise woman, she was a stone-cold genius." She turned the screen toward me. There it was, a short paragraph of dense, legal text. Isabel read it aloud, her voice filled with awe. "This property, bequeathed solely to my granddaughter, Aurora Miller Black, shall not be leveraged, used as collateral, or encumbered by any form of debt without the express, notarized, and witnessed written consent of said Aurora Miller Black. Should any attempt be made to circumvent this clause through forgery, coercion, or any other fraudulent means, all secondary and spousal interests in the property shall be immediately and irrevocably voided, reverting full and unassailable ownership to Aurora Miller Black alone. It's amazing, isn't it? How the people who love us can continue to protect us, even long after they're gone. Have you ever received a piece of advice or a gift from the past that ended up saving you in the future? It feels like a little bit of magic. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Isabel's face. She looked at me, and her eyes were gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "Do you understand what this means?" she said. "When Damien forged your signature on that HELOC application, he didn't just commit a crime. He triggered the Eleanor Special. He personally, legally, and irrevocably signed away any and all claim he ever had to your house. He just handed you the entire thing on a silver platter. The trap, set years ago by a loving grandmother, had just been sprung, and Damien had no idea he was already caught. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, at the words my grandmother had so carefully chosen. It felt like her hand was on my shoulder, a steadying presence from across the years. The shock and rage that had been consuming me began to recede, replaced by a surge of pure, cold adrenaline. I finally understood. My grandmother hadn't just left me a house. She had left me an escape plan. I looked at Isabel, and the grief in my eyes had been replaced by a flinty resolve she hadn't seen in years. "So what's the first step?" I asked, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. Isabel's lawyer smile was back, sharp and predatory. "The first step is that I go to war for you. I'll draft an emergency petition to the family court, citing this clause and attaching the proof of his attempted fraud. With the forged HELOC application as evidence, any judge will grant a temporary restraining order and an immediate enforcement of the clause. By tomorrow afternoon, we will have a court order affirming you as the sole, undisputed owner of that property. He won't even know what hit him until he's served." I nodded, processing the legal blitzkrieg she was planning. It was brilliant, it was decisive, but it wasn't enough. Securing the house meant he could still fight it, drag my grandmother's name and my life through a protracted, ugly battle. He would still be a ghost haunting those halls. I needed a clean break. A total annihilation of the life we had shared. "I want to sell it, Izzy," I said quietly. Isabel froze, her pen hovering over a legal pad. "What? Aurora, you love that house. It's your entire family history." "It was," I corrected her gently. "It was my sanctuary. But he's tainted it. Every room I walk into, I see him. I see his lies. He tried to use the heart of my family to fund his betrayal. It's not a sanctuary anymore. It's a crime scene. To be free of him, I have to be free of it." Have you ever had to make the decision to let go of something you truly loved? A home, a job, a relationship, not because you wanted to, but because you knew it was the only way to save yourself. It's the hardest and bravest kind of choice. Isabel studied my face for a long moment, and then she nodded, her expression shifting from concern to fierce determination. She picked up her phone. "If we're going to do this, we're doing it fast, and we're doing it quietly. You don't need a real estate agent, you need a miracle worker." She dialed a number from memory. "Julianne, it's Isabel. I have a highly motivated seller with a legacy property in Concord. I need an off-market, all-cash sale, and I need it to close by Friday." "Yes, this Friday." Julianne was a legend in Boston real estate, a shark in a Chanel suit who moved multi-million-dollar properties the way other people ordered coffee. She arrived at the house that afternoon, her eyes sweeping over every detail with an appraiser's cold precision. I explained the situation, leaving out the personal details. "I just said I needed a fast, discreet sale." She didn't blink. "A property like this, with this history, in this market? An all-cash offer isn't impossible," she said, her tone brisk. "It'll cost you a premium in my commission, but I have a waiting list of pre-vetted, high-net-worth buyers looking for exactly this. No showings, no open houses, one visit, one offer. I have a surgeon and his family relocating from Stanford. They want a place with character, and they need to close before the school year. They're my first call." The next 5 days were a blur. While Isabel worked her magic in the courts, Julianne orchestrated the sale with the precision of a military general. The surgeon's family came the next day. They walked through the rooms, their voices hushed with reverence, and made a full-price, all-cash offer of $1.8 million an hour later. Then came the storm of paperwork. Appraisals were waived, contingencies were non-existent. Lawyers and paralegals from 3 different firms worked around the clock. Every day, I packed another room of my life into boxes, a painful but purifying ritual. With each signed document, I felt a piece of my past fall away, replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating lightness of an unknown future. On Friday afternoon, exactly 5 days after Damien's fateful phone call, I sat in a sterile closing office in downtown Boston. I signed the final document, my hand gliding over the paper. It was done. The money was in escrow, wired to a new bank account in my name only. The house, my grandmother's house, was no longer mine. Damien was still in Nantucket, probably drinking wine and watching the sunset with Sofia, blissfully unaware that the very ground beneath his life back home had just been sold. The days between the sale of the house and Damien's scheduled return were the strangest of my life. I was living in Isabel's spare bedroom, a refugee surrounded by the boxed-up fragments of my former existence. I felt hollowed out, but also strangely light. The massive, gut-wrenching decision was behind me. The house was gone, the money was safe. All that was left was the final, messy confrontation. My plan was simple. Let him come back to a completely empty house with a "for sale" sign on the lawn that read "sold." I'd have a courier deliver the divorce papers. It would be quiet, brutal, and final. But the universe, it turned out, had a far more spectacular ending in mind. It decided to hand me the script for the perfect final act, a gift of pure, unadulterated karma. It came in the form of a text message, the night before he was due to return. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at it, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. The message read, "Connie, just confirming for tomorrow night. 7 p.m. sharp at the Concord House. Damien is finally bringing Sylvia home for good. We're going to have a little welcome to the family party for her, and make sure the other one finally gets the message and takes the last of her things and leaves. So glad he's finally trading in the old model. Don't be late." My blood turned to ice. Connie was my mother-in-law, Regina's sister. Regina, in her boorish incompetence, had texted me by mistake. I read it again. And a third time. The initial shock gave way to a slow, creeping wave of absolute horror, which was then immediately overtaken by a giddy, almost hysterical sense of disbelief. They weren't just replacing me. They were planning a party to celebrate it. A coronation for the Mistress, held in my grandmother's home, designed as my final, public humiliation. They were going to kick me out of my own house and then drink champagne to toast my departure. I mean, can you even fathom that level of cruelty? To not just replace someone, but to plan a celebration around their humiliation. It's like something out of a movie. Let me know if you've ever witnessed a level of audacity that just left you completely speechless. I started to laugh. It was a wild, unhinged sound that brought Isabel running from her kitchen. "What is it? What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes wide with alarm. I couldn't speak. I just handed her my phone. She read the message, and her face went through a remarkable series of transformations. Confusion, then fury, her knuckles turning white. And then she looked up at me, and a slow, wicked grin spread across her face. "No," she whispered. "They didn't." "Oh, they did," I said, my laughter finally subsiding into a cold, clear calm. "They're throwing a party. To kick you out of a house that you sold 4 days ago?" Isabel fell back onto the sofa, howling with laughter. "Aurora, this isn't just justice. This is poetry. This is a gift from the cosmos." And in that moment, the entire plan changed. My quiet, dignified exit strategy went up in flames, replaced by a vision of something far more satisfying. This wasn't a private matter anymore. They had decided to make it a public spectacle, and I was going to give them the show of a lifetime. "Get your phone," I told Isabel, my mind racing. "We have a few calls to make." First, I called the new owners. I explained, without going into too much detail, that there was a situation with my difficult ex-husband and that a small complication had arisen. I asked them a colossal favor. "I know your movers are scheduled for the morning," I said, "but would it be at all possible for you to arrive with your truck tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock sharp? I know it's an insane request, but it would solve a very significant problem for me. I will, of course, cover any and all costs for the inconvenience." The wife, a kind woman named Sarah, must have heard the desperation in my voice. She hesitated for only a second before saying, "We'll be there." Next, Isabel called the sheriff's department. "Deputy Miller, Isabel Fuentes here. A small change of plans regarding the service for Damian Black tomorrow. Can you ensure the papers are served at precisely 7:05 p.m. at the Concord property?" "Excellent. Thank you." The stage was now set. The actors were all heading to their places, blissfully unaware of the roles they were about to play in my final performance. They wanted a party to welcome the new lady of the house. I was going to make sure they got one. The next evening, the air in Concord was thick with the late summer humidity. Isabel and I were parked down the street from the house, tucked away behind a thick grove of ancient maple trees. We had a perfect, unobstructed view of the front lawn. My heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. Every part of me wanted to drive away, to not see his face, but a stronger, colder part of me needed to witness this. I needed to see the final act of the life he had destroyed. I had to watch him fall. At 6:55 p.m., they arrived. It wasn't just one car, it was a small motorcade of arrogance. Damian's gleaming black BMW pulled in first, followed by his father's silver Mercedes. Damian stepped out, looking tanned, rested, and insufferably smug from his week of infidelity. He opened the passenger door, and out stepped Sylvia. She was beautiful, I had to give him that, in a sharp, brittle way. She gazed up at my grandmother's house with a wide, possessive smile, as if she were a queen surveying her new castle. Then came the rest of them. Regina, his mother, draped in linen, and looking thoroughly pleased with herself. His father, a quiet, complicit shadow, and his brother Leo, with a vacant-looking girlfriend clinging to his arm. They looked like a victorious army, arriving to claim their spoils. I watched as Damian swaggered to the front door and unlocked it with a key he no longer had any right to possess. They all trooped inside. Through the large front windows, I could see their silhouettes moving about. They weren't alarmed by the empty rooms. They were delighted. I could almost hear Regina's shrill laugh. "Well, look at that. It seems she finally got the message and saved us the trouble of throwing her out." They had brought coolers and bags with them. I saw Damian pop the cork on a bottle of champagne. They were toasting to their victory, to my defeat, in the heart of my grandmother's home. Then, at 7 p.m., right on schedule, it happened. A massive 26-foot moving truck rumbled down our quiet, historic street. It was a beautiful, jarring sight. It slowed, and with a loud hiss of its air brakes, it turned and backed right into the driveway, completely blocking in their luxury cars. The side of the truck read in big, friendly letters, "Wright Family Movers." The front door of the truck opened, and a man in his early 40s, wearing a polo shirt and jeans, hopped out. This was David Wright, the surgeon from California. He held a clipboard in one hand. His wife Sarah got out of the passenger side, followed by their 2 young children, who immediately started chasing each other on the lawn. They looked like the cover of a catalog for happy suburban living. The front door of the house flew open, and Damian stormed out, his face a mask of annoyance. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "Can I help you?" "You've got the wrong address. This is a private party." Mr. Wright consulted his clipboard with an air of calm patience. "I don't think so," he said, his voice pleasant but firm. "This is 24 Elm Street, right? I'm David Wright. My family and I are the new owners. We closed last Friday. Today's our move-in day." He gestured with his pen toward the house. Damian's face went through a fascinating transformation. The annoyance didn't turn into anger. Not yet. It turned into a blank, uncomprehending confusion. He actually laughed. A short, sharp, disbelieving bark. "New owners? Buddy, you've been scammed. This is my house. I've lived here for 4 years. Have you ever seen someone's carefully constructed reality just shatter in front of their eyes? That moment of absolute cognitive dissonance, where their brain literally cannot compute the truth. It's a terrifying thing to watch. Regina and Sylvia had appeared in the doorway behind him, drawn by the commotion. "Damian, what is this?" Regina demanded. "Tell this man to move his hideous truck." Mr. Wright's pleasant expression didn't waver. He simply held up a thick folder of documents. "Sir, with all due respect, I have the legally executed and recorded deed right here." It was a cash sale, all finalized. "Perhaps you should speak with your wife, Aurora? She's the one who sold it to us." He said my name, and in that one moment, the confusion on Damien's face finally curdled into dawning, abject horror. The trap had sprung, and he was just beginning to feel the teeth. My name, spoken by a stranger on the lawn of what Damien still believed was his home, hung in the air like a gunshot. The effect on him was profound. The arrogant bravado, the condescending smirk, it all just dissolved. The blood drained from his face, leaving his expensive Nantucket tan looking like a cheap, sallow mask. He stared at Mr. Wright, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. "Aurora?" he finally stammered, the name a foreign, toxic word on his tongue. "What are you talking about? She wouldn't. She couldn't." Before Mr. Wright could respond, Regina lunged forward, a mother lioness, defending her deeply stupid cub. "Who do you think you are?" she shrieked at Mr. Wright, her voice a shrill weapon. "This is my son's house. I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but you need to leave immediately before I call the police." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Sylvia, the mistress, was no longer smiling. Her perfectly curated expression of triumph had been replaced with a darting, panicked look. This wasn't the seamless transition into a life of luxury she had been promised. This was messy. This was public. She kept looking from Damien's stunned face to the moving truck, and I could see the cold calculation in her eyes. She wasn't assessing his emotional state. She was assessing her investment, and the returns were looking grim. As Regina's tirade reached a fever pitch, another vehicle quietly pulled up to the curb. It wasn't flashy like the others. It was a dark blue Ford Explorer with a government plate and the official seal of the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office on the door. A deputy in a crisp, brown uniform stepped out. He was a tall man, calm and unhurried, with an air of authority that immediately silenced the chaos on the lawn. He didn't rush. He simply walked up the long driveway, his gaze taking in the scene, the luxury cars blocked by the moving truck, the shouting mother, the stunned husband, the confused new owners. He stopped a few feet from the group and addressed Damien directly, his voice even and professional. "Are you Damien Black?" Damien, seeing the uniform as a lifeline, turned to him with a look of desperate relief. "Yes. Yes, officer, thank God you're here." "This man," he said, pointing an accusatory finger at Mr. Wright, "is trespassing on my property and refusing to leave." The deputy didn't even glance at Mr. Wright. His focus was entirely on Damien. He held up a thick, 9x12 manila envelope. "Mr. Black, my name is Deputy Miller. I'm not here about a trespassing complaint. I'm here to serve you with these official documents from the Middlesex Family and Probate Court." Damien stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He made no move to take it. The deputy, with practiced indifference, simply reached out and placed the envelope squarely on the gleaming hood of Damien's BMW. "You've been officially served, sir. Have a good evening." "What is this?" Regina screeched, grabbing Damien's arm. "Damien, what is going on?" With hands that trembled visibly, Damien tore open the envelope. From my car, I couldn't read the text, but I had every word memorized. I knew the first page was the petition for divorce, citing infidelity and fraud. I knew the next was the emergency court order, effective immediately, freezing every bank account, every investment portfolio, every stock, and every asset with his name on it. And the final, most satisfying page, a temporary restraining order, legally forbidding him from coming within 100 yards of me. It's incredible how a few pieces of paper, just ink on a page, can hold so much power. They can end a marriage, freeze a fortune, and completely alter the course of someone's life in an instant. Have you ever had a moment where a single document changed everything for you? He was standing on a lawn that was no longer his, next to a car he could no longer afford, with accounts that were now frozen solid. He had lost his wife. He had lost his home. He had lost his money. The full, suffocating weight of it all was crashing down on him in that single, public, devastating moment. His little party was just getting started, and the guest of honor had not yet arrived. Damien stood frozen on the lawn, the legal papers trembling in his hand. The world around him, the moving truck, his shrieking mother, the confused new owners, had faded into a dull, meaningless roar. His entire universe had narrowed to the black ink on those pages, each word a nail in the coffin of the life he had built. He was so consumed by his own destruction that he didn't hear the sound at first. But I did. From across the street, it was as clean and final as a judge's gavel, the solid, expensive thump of a car door closing. Every head turned. Parked on the opposite curb was Isabel's car, a sleek black Audi that was the vehicular embodiment of her personality, powerful, understated, and not to be messed with. The passenger door opened, and I stepped out. I had thought about this moment for days. What I would wear, how I would look. I didn't choose an outfit of mourning. I chose armor. A tailored, cream-colored pantsuit that was the epitome of professional elegance. My hair was pulled back in a severe, chic bun, and my makeup was flawless. I was not the tear-stained, heartbroken wife he had left behind. I was the CEO of his downfall. Isabel emerged from the driver's side, looking every bit the legal assassin she was in a sharp charcoal dress. We didn't rush, we walked. Slowly, deliberately, across the quiet suburban street, our heels clicking on the asphalt in a steady, unhurried rhythm. It was the sound of an approach, the sound of a reckoning. As we stepped onto the lawn, my lawn, for the last time I saw their faces. Regina let out a choked gasp, her face contorting with a look of pure, venomous hatred. Leo looked like a scared child. And Sylvia looked at me, at my suit, at the calm power in my stance, and then she looked at the crumbling, pathetic man beside her. I saw the exact moment she realized she had hitched her wagon to a falling star, but my eyes were only for Damien. He stared at me as if I were an apparition, a ghost from a life he thought he controlled. But I wasn't the ghost of the woman he had broken. I was the ghost of his future, come back to haunt him. I stopped about 10 feet away from him, a legally safe distance. I didn't glance at the deputy, or the new owners, or the papers in his hand. I looked right into his eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw not the charming man I had fallen for, but the weak, hollow creature he truly was. There is no feeling in the world quite like looking someone in the eye who has tried to break you, and knowing in your soul that you are no longer afraid of them. It's like every ounce of power they ever held over you evaporates into thin air. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment of pure, undiluted freedom? My voice when I spoke was quiet, calm, and carried easily in the stunned silence. Welcome home, Damien. I let the words settle, a gentle, poisonous rain. Then, my eyes flickered for a fraction of a second to Sylvia, who flinched as if struck. I hope you and your whole family enjoy the party. That was what finally broke him, the quiet, calm control. It was a language he didn't understand. The shock in his eyes finally ignited into pure, sputtering rage. You, he snarled, the word tearing from his throat. He took a step toward me. You did this. You think you can get away with this? Before he could take a second step, Isabel moved. She didn't touch him. She didn't have to. She simply took one step forward, placing herself slightly in front of me, a silent, legal shield. Her voice was pure steel. I'd advise you to read that restraining order very, very carefully, Mr. Black, she said, her tone dangerously low. The deputy is still right there. I'm sure he'd be happy to explain the penalties for violating it. Damien froze, his fists clenched, his body trembling with a rage he had nowhere to put. He was trapped, outmaneuvered, outclassed, and utterly defeated. He couldn't touch me. He couldn't even yell at me without risking arrest. All he could do was stand there, on what was now a stranger's lawn, and watch as the woman he had underestimated dismantled his entire world with a few quiet words. There was nothing left to say. After Isabel's final, chilling warning, the fight completely drained out of Damien. He stood there, trembling, a cornered animal realizing the trap was inescapable. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled not with love or remorse, but with a bewildered, impotent hatred. Then he turned, and without a word to his mother, his brother, or the mistress he had ruined his life for, he got into his BMW. The others followed, a silent, shamed procession. They backed out of the driveway, their luxury cars looking cheap and tawdry in the face of such profound humiliation, and drove off into the night. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I just felt quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange, clean silence. The war on the front lawn was over, but the war for justice was just beginning. The next morning, while I was drinking coffee in the quiet of Isabel's apartment, she was in her office, launching the next phase of the assault. This was the part that wasn't personal. It was purely strategic. This was about ensuring that Damien faced the full consequences of his actions, not just from me, but from the world he had worked so hard to impress. First, she made a call to the vice president of the fraud investigation unit at the bank Damien had submitted the HELOC application to. It wasn't a threatening call, it was a formal notification. As my legal counsel, she informed them that a fraudulent application had been submitted using a forged signature, and that we were in possession of irrefutable evidence. She sent them a secure digital package containing my sworn affidavit, a copy of the application with my perfectly mimicked signature, and a note stating that we intended to cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation. Banks, especially with federal lending regulations, do not take forgery lightly. It's a direct attack on their integrity. I knew, and Isabel knew, they would be legally obligated to report it to the authorities. With that one email, Damien was no longer just a cheating husband in a messy divorce. He was the subject of a federal fraud investigation. The second blow was even more devastating. Isabel drafted a formal letter. It was printed on her firm's heavy, cream-colored letterhead, the kind of paper that exudes quiet, expensive power. It was addressed to the head of compliance and the senior managing partner at Damien's prestigious financial firm, the kind of place where reputation is the only currency that truly matters. The letter was a masterpiece of professional destruction. It politely and dispassionately detailed Mr. Fording, and of 40 as an A. Black's extramarital dissipation of over $250,000 in marital assets, and more damningly, referenced an attached exhibit, the attempted fraudulent procurement of a $500,000 home equity line of credit through the forgery of a spousal signature. It concluded by stating our intention to pursue all available legal remedies, both civil and criminal. A courier hand-delivered it to their downtown office at 10 a.m. It's terrifying how quickly a reputation can be destroyed, isn't it? Years spent building a career, a public image of success and integrity, all of it can be vaporized in a single afternoon by the truth. It really makes you think about the foundation everything is built on. The fallout was immediate. As Isabel later told me, a firm like that, which handles billions of dollars of other people's money, operates on a foundation of absolute trust. A senior consultant facing federal fraud charges isn't just a problem employee, he's a catastrophic liability. By lunchtime, Damien was summoned to the 40th floor boardroom. There was no discussion, no negotiation. It was a termination for cause, effective immediately. I pictured him there, in his expensive suit, being told that the career he had sacrificed his integrity for was over. I pictured him being escorted to his office by a silent security guard, his colleagues averting their eyes as he packed his personal effects into a sad, brown cardboard box. The walk of shame, out through the gleaming lobby and onto the street. He wasn't Damien Black, the financial whiz, anymore. He was just another unemployed man, carrying his life in a box, about to face the law. He had built his entire world on a foundation of lies, and I hadn't destroyed it. I had simply held up a mirror, and the whole rotten structure had collapsed under the weight of its own deceit. Damien's implosion wasn't a contained event. It was a black hole, and it began pulling his entire family into the void with him, a vortex of their own making. I didn't seek out news of their downfall, but in a small, gossipy town like Concord, news travels fast. And frankly, my lawyer, Isabel, has a network that would make the CIA blush. The first reports of the collateral damage started trickling in within 48 hours of that disastrous welcome home party. And the first person to abandon the sinking ship, unsurprisingly, was the mistress, Sofia. I could picture her perfectly. The moment she saw the moving truck, the moment she saw the deputy, the moment she saw the look of utter, powerless shock on Damien's face, she knew the investment had gone bad. She wasn't in love with a man. She was in love with a lifestyle. A lifestyle funded by $250,000 of my money and the promise of a multi-million-dollar house. When the assets were frozen, and the house was gone. The man became worthless to her. Isabel heard through a friend that Sylvia had cleared out her downtown apartment by the next morning. She was a ghost. She didn't answer Damien's frantic, desperate calls. She just took her severance package, my $250,000, and vanished, likely already scouting for her next wealthy benefactor. She was a symptom of his disease, and once the host was terminal, she moved on without a backward glance. Next to fall was the brother, Leo. His entire future had been predicated on the $500,000 condo Damien was going to fraudulently secure for him. His fiancée hadn't said yes to Leo the man. She had said yes to the promise of a life in Boston's Back Bay, funded by his successful older brother. With Damien's career in flames and his bank accounts frozen solid, that promise turned to ash. The engagement was called off within a week. Leo was left exactly where he started, a man in his late 20s with no ambition, no prospects, and now no fiancé and no free condo. But the most satisfying piece of karmic justice was reserved for the architect of my years of quiet misery, my mother-in-law, Regina. The spectacle on the front lawn was the social equivalent of a nuclear bomb in her perfectly manicured world. The story was simply too juicy, too delicious to be contained. The real estate agent, the moving truck, the sheriff, the mistress, the dramatic arrival of the scorned wife, it was the stuff of local legend. Her friends at the country club, the women she played bridge with, the charity boards she sat on, they all knew. I received a call from a former neighbor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable. She spoke in a hushed, conspiratorial tone, telling me how Regina had become a pariah overnight. People would see her at the grocery store and turn down another aisle. Her calls went unreturned. She was a social ghost, haunted by the public consequences of her private cruelty. She had spent years treating me like an outsider, and now she had finally become one herself. It's a hard lesson, but standing by and enabling someone's cruelty makes you a part of it, doesn't it? They all watched him disrespect me for years. They participated in it, and when the bill for his behavior came due, they were all forced to pay a piece of it. Have you ever seen a whole system crumble because of one person's bad actions? Even Damien's quiet, stoic father wasn't spared. His complicity had been in his silence, in his refusal to check his son's monstrous ego and his wife's venomous behavior. Now his peaceful retirement was shattered. He was left to manage the fallout, a socially ostracized wife, one son who was an unemployed disgrace, and another who was now a jilted bachelor. The perfect family portrait he had so carefully maintained had been set on fire, and he was left to sweep up the ashes. I never set out to ruin a family. I only wanted to save myself. But their entire identity was so deeply entangled with Damien's success and their shared sense of superiority. They weren't a family built on love or mutual respect. They were a syndicate, built on a foundation of arrogance and entitlement. And when I finally stood up and refused to be their victim any longer, the entire hollow enterprise came crashing down. While the Black family's world was collapsing under the weight of public disgrace and legal trouble, mine was quietly, terrifyingly, beginning to open up. A week after that night on the lawn, after the dust had settled and the gossip had reached a fever pitch, I received an email from the closing attorney. The subject line was simple: transfer complete. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and logged into the new bank account Isabel had helped me set up, an account with a name that was mine alone. I navigated to the summary page, took a deep breath, and looked. The number glowed on the screen: $1,800,000. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't feel real. It was the kind of number you see in movies or read about in financial reports, an abstract figure with too many commas. I had expected to feel a rush of elation, a desire to pop champagne and celebrate. But what washed over me was something entirely different, something much deeper. It was the feeling of 100-pound weight being lifted from my chest, a weight I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. It was the sound of shackles, rusted from years of quiet tears and swallowed pride, finally shattering and falling to the floor. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely, unequivocally, and powerfully on my own. I was beholden to no one. I was safe. That money wasn't a lottery winning. It was a reclamation. It was the physical manifestation of my grandmother's love, a final act of protection that had reached across time to save me. It was the value of the history Damien had tried to erase, the security he had tried to steal, the pain I had endured, all converted into a tangible force for my new beginning. It was the ultimate go-to-hell fund, and it was the foundation upon which I would rebuild my entire world. For anyone who has ever felt trapped in a relationship because of financial fear, you know that money isn't just about buying things, it's about buying choices. It's about the ability to say no, to walk away, to build a life entirely on your own terms. What does financial freedom truly mean to you? Is it a number, or is it a feeling? For me, it was the feeling of pure, untainted oxygen filling my lungs for the first time in years. After a few more weeks of living out of boxes at Isabel's incredibly gracious home, I knew it was time. I needed my own walls. I needed a space that had never heard Damien's voice, a place with no ghosts. So, one evening, with a glass of wine, I opened up a real estate website. But this time, the search was different. I wasn't looking for a good school district or a family-friendly neighborhood. I wasn't considering guest rooms for in-laws or a home office for a husband. I was looking for a place for me. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in filters I'd never dared to use before. Downtown, high-rise, penthouse. I scrolled through listings of sleek, modern apartments with floor-to-ceiling windows, places that looked out over the glittering Boston skyline. I imagined a life there. A life filled with my own art on the walls, my own music playing, my own friends filling the space with laughter. I wasn't just searching for an apartment, I was designing my future. And then I saw it. A penthouse in the Seaport district with a private terrace overlooking the harbor. It had a massive, open-concept living space perfect for entertaining, and a second bedroom with stunning natural light that would make an ideal design studio. It was the furthest thing from the historic, grounded home in Concord. It was a castle in the sky. It was a new start. My heart, which I thought had been shattered into a million pieces, started to beat a little faster, not with anxiety, but with excitement. I picked up the phone and called the agent, my voice clear and strong. I wasn't just a woman looking for a place to live. I was a woman with a fortune, a future, and a pen, ready to sign the first chapter of her new life. The first winter in my new life was the most beautiful I had ever known. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse in the Seaport, I would watch the snow fall over Boston Harbor, blanketing the city in a clean, quiet white. There were no ghosts here. No creaking floorboards whispering of past sorrows, no lingering scent of a man I no longer knew. There was just me, the city lights, and the boundless, exhilarating silence of a life that was entirely my own. The grief for the marriage I thought I had was still there, a faint, silvery scar, but it no longer ached. It was just a part of my story, not the end of it. With the suffocating weight of Damien's judgment and his family's disapproval gone, something inside me broke free. My creativity, which had been stifled for years, came roaring back to life. My small interior design firm, which I had deliberately kept modest to avoid outshining my husband, became my everything. I poured all the energy I had once spent managing his moods and walking on eggshells into my work. I rebranded, hired 2 talented young designers, and went after the kind of ambitious, high-concept projects I had only dreamed of before. I was no longer designing comfortable, family-friendly homes. I was creating art. My first big project was a commission to design the interiors for a new boutique hotel in a historic Beacon Hill building. I threw myself into it, blending the neighborhood's old-world charm with a bold, modern aesthetic. The project was a massive success. It was featured in Architectural Digest and Boston Magazine. Suddenly, I wasn't just a local designer. I was a name. I was no longer Damien Black's wife. I was Aurora Miller, the visionary behind the Chandler Hotel. Clients began to seek me out, not just for my taste but for my story. They saw a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes, and they wanted some of that strength, that resilience, infused into their own homes. My pain had become my brand. My survival had become my art. It's an incredible thing that happens when you finally remove a toxic presence from your life. It's like all the energy you spent managing their moods and their needs comes rushing back into you, a tidal wave of your own potential. Have you ever felt that surge of rediscovery after a painful ending? That moment you remember who you were before someone else tried to make you smaller? I started traveling again, not to resorts I was barely welcome at, but for inspiration. I went to Milan for Design Week, to Paris to wander through museums, to Kyoto to study the beauty of minimalist gardens. I was investing in myself, filling the well that had been dry for so long. About 6 months after our confrontation, I got a final update from Isabel. The divorce was finalized, a simple matter of a judge signing a document since Damien had no assets left to fight for. The criminal case for the bank fraud had also concluded. Faced with the mountain of evidence, he had accepted a plea bargain. He was sentenced to 18 months in a low-security federal prison. There was no dramatic trial, no public spectacle. His downfall ended not with a bang, but with the quiet, pathetic click of a cell door. When Isabel told me, I didn't feel a thrill of victory. I just felt nothing. He was a stranger, a ghost from a past life. His fate was his own, and it no longer had anything to do with me. That night, I stood on my private terrace, a glass of wine in my hand, looking out at the sprawling, glittering expanse of the city. For so long, my world had been the size of my house in Concord, confined by the expectations and desires of one man. Now, my world was as big as the horizon. I wasn't thinking about Damien, or his family, or his mistress. I was thinking about a new project, a new client, a new trip. I was thinking about my future. The best revenge, I realized, was never about the exquisite, fleeting satisfaction of watching your enemy fall. The sweetest, most profound revenge is the quiet, daily, enduring joy of your own happiness. It's building a life so beautiful and full that there's simply no room left in it for the ghosts of the past. And as I looked out at the city, at the life I had built for myself, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my soul that I had won. So that's the story. That's how I lost a marriage and a home that held my entire history, only to find a future I never could have imagined. For a long time, I thought this was a story about revenge. But I've come to realize it's not. Revenge is about looking backwards, at the people who hurt you. This story is about looking forward, at the person you have the power to become. The most important lesson in all of this came from my grandmother, Eleanor. The greatest inheritance she left me wasn't the $1.8 million house, it was the quiet wisdom embedded in that secret clause. It was a message sent through time, and the message was this: your security, your safety, and your worth should never be entirely in someone else's hands. You must always keep a piece of your power for yourself. You must always be your own sanctuary. If you're listening to this and any part of my story resonates with you, if you feel small or trapped or unheard in your own life, I want you to hear this. That quiet voice in your gut that's telling you something is wrong, it's not paranoia, it's wisdom. Listen to it. The path to reclaiming your life is terrifying, and it will ask more of you than you think you have to give. But on the other side of that fear is you, the real you, the strong, brilliant, and whole person you were always meant to be. The sweetest victory isn't watching someone else's life fall apart. It's watching your own finally, beautifully, come together. Thank you for listening to my story. Be brave, be kind to yourself, and never, ever let anyone undervalue your worth. Take care.